Shabbat Shalom gathering to everyone here at BLC, the Biblical Lifestyle Center in Texarkana. Good to see everybody that could make it in the storms we're having this morning, but it's beautiful. The earth has already been drinking of the water that's being poured out of the heavens. So I've seen life this morning as the sun was coming up. I was looking out my back window and out, I see a fox. I haven't seen a fox out there in over a year. And I saw the fox go by, and then I saw the larger fox, probably the mother fox, come out and call the fox back into the woods. And they went back to the woods. And I thought, thank you, Father, for starting my day by understanding we are in a difficult world. We live in a dangerous place, and sometimes the parent has to call back the children back into that place which is designed for them, that place, rather than going out in the street and wandering around and getting hit by stray vehicles or shot by angry people or confined and put into a area of confinement by ideologues. We are now in a situation where we must retreat, go back to where we belong, go back to the environment we were created for and the ecosystem in which we thrive. That is where we're called back. There is this great call coming from heaven today, and so I'm hoping we'll be able to explain that, be able to parse it, be able to awaken a hunger in your heart to come back where you belong, to come back to the throne room, to come back to the place of holy energy, empowerment that's coming forth from heaven, come back to the place where we thrive. And that will be our calling today. Welcome to all those who have joined us online. I will try to make this worth your while and worth your time. I'm ever mindful of the fact that you don't have to let me into your room, into your computer, into your household, or into your smartphone. It is a gift from you, an honoring of me, and I will take that very seriously, and I will try to speak directly to what you need to hear and what is being spoken, hopefully from the heaven's throne, using just my mouthpiece and to speak unto your heart. This is the Sabbath. What a beautiful day. This is a good day to reconnect with the divine, to reconnect with holiness. This is an assigned day, the seventh day of the week, the day when we step aside from all of the mundane. And like that little fox being called back by its parent into the place of the ecosystem where it belongs, into the environment in which it thrives, so are we on every Shabbat. And this Shabbat is a special one. This is the Shabbat in which the 7 weeks of consolation, the 7 weeks of comfort and encouragement and inspiration that we do every time this year at every time, or every time at this year, I should say. We are at the midpoint, and we are at the point where we're changing focus from the comforting and the consolation for the pain and the suffering and the misery that we have endured at the hands of the environment that we were not suited for, to refocusing our attention on what we're supposed to do when we get back to the ecosystem in which we thrive, and how we're supposed to bring the light and the salt and the beauty and the wisdom and the kindness and the mercies of that ecosystem into every area that the sole of our feet should touch. It is the week of Parsha number 48. In Hebrew, the phraseology, the name is Shoftim, a plural of the word Shofet. We'll talk about what that means. Hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss that. That was how this begins. It begins in Deuteronomy Chapter 16 and verse 18. We left off last week at 16:17 from Parsha the behold, the vision that Moshe was downloading to us. Now we're taking that vision and we're going to run with it, as the prophet Habakkuk says. Write down the vision and run with it. Now this is how we run with the vision that we were given last week, and this is to learn how to thrive and to carry forth the message and the wisdom and the goodness of that ecosystem in which we thrive into the rest of the world. Run with the vision. This is the Parsha Shoftim. And like I say, it's Deuteronomy 16:18 through 21:9, through chapter 21, verse 9. This is just past the midpoint of Moshe's come up here and see what I see discourse. I can also call it the two pathways diverging discourse, when he tries to show us that we need to disentangle and diverge from the way the world is going, like that fox disentangled and diverged from the roadway he was headed toward and headed back into his environment, headed back to where he belongs. So we're just to disentangle from and diverge from the ways of the world, the conversations the world is having, the narratives the world is spreading, the anger, the frustration, the worries, the anxieties the world is promoting, the differences the world is highlighting, and to return to our endemic state, the state where we belong, the state where the sons and daughters of the Holy One respond to his voice and do his will. So I happen to call this particular section of the Torah, these few chapters from 16, 18 through 21, 9, the blueprint for heaven's court patterned infrastructure. I've been talking for the last 2 weeks, and the Torah has been laying out for us this vision for 2 weeks of the heaven-scented society, the kingdom of heaven-scented society, I think I've called it. And now we're going to get deeper into the kingdom of heaven-scented society. We're going to talk about the heaven's court patterned infrastructure. This is the environment. This is the ecosystem in which we thrive. This is where we're supposed to go every Shabbat. This is where we're supposed to find ourselves when we gather together to discuss the Torah, where we gather together to pray. When we come into this heaven's court patterned infrastructure. And in that infrastructure, we will find certain patterns that are heaven's courts pattern. So to do this, to get you started, to awaken you to what you're being called to do and learn to overcome the systems of the world, we need to take a little trip. We need to go on a little road trip, and that road trip is, we'll take it with Isaiah the prophet. We'll take it with Ezekiel the prophet. We'll take it with Daniel the prophet. We'll take it with John the revelator. We'll take it with Moshe the prophet. We're going to go up into the heavenlies. We're going to actually transcend in our minds and in our thoughts and our meditations this morning. We're going to transcend what the news is telling you, what your friends are telling you, what the social media feeds are telling you. And we're going to go into the heavenly courts. And we've got the pattern laid for us. We've got the outline of our ecosystem in which we thrive laid out for us by these different prophets. So let's just start from the end. We'll go to the end first. Let's go to John. Let's go to the Revelator. I saw heavens open, and a voice called out to me in chapter 4 of Revelation. And a voice called out, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place." And from that point forward, he says, and then I saw, and I was in the heavenlies, and then I saw thrones, and thrones were set in place, Daniel says in chapter 7. I saw a throne, and one seated on a throne, and I saw thrones set in place, and there were 24 elders, and there were 4 living creatures. And if you go through all these different varieties, you see these patterns of the ecosystem and the sources of wisdom and inspiration, the sources of publication of the truth, of the wisdom of God. And you see the throne at the center of it all is this glorious, majestic throne, and the one who sits on the throne is fantastic and beautiful and marvelous and wise. And then you see around him are the seraphim and the cherubim. You see when you think of seraphim, think of what Isaiah said about the seraphim. What did the seraphim do? That first they flew around, they said, "Holy, holy, holy." And the other thing they did is one of the seraphs brought a burning coal, and touched his lips. So think of the seraph as the one with the burning coal. Now we have this idea of in the heavenly court, someone is waiting for you. A creature is waiting. Someone is there to touch your lips with the burning coal. That's the burning coal seraph. And then there was cherub. You see cherubim. There's cherubim everywhere. And these cherubim, what are cherubim? Think of the cherubim as not with the burning coal. The cherub has the flaming sword, right? But in Genesis 3:24 talks about he placed the cherub with a burning, flashing sword that would guard. He's guarding away. He is guarding away. He is a protector. He is a defender. So we have the man seated on the throne, the king seated on the throne. We have the cherubim. We have the seraphim, the ones with the burning coal, the one with a flaming sword. And then we have the 4 living creatures. And these 4 living creatures are glorious in all their angles. They show all sorts of kinds of things reflecting the creation of the Holy One on the earth. Different images that they project, and they're mysterious, but they're beautiful, and they inspire, and they awe us. And then we see the 24 elders. There are 24 thrones set, and there are 24 elders, and the elders are constantly gazing upon the beauty of the King. And that's their vision, that's their focus. And they are not looking down upon earth and judging the earth. They're looking up at the heavens and seeing the majesty and looking into his eyes, into his heart. And they're throwing down their own crowns and casting their crowns at his feet. Worthy is he who sits on the throne, the King who sits on the throne. And you see then a great multitude of the heavenly host around them. And you see the different forms of the angels. And this is your natural environment. This is the environment from which you were come. This is the environment for which you were born. This is the environment for which you were created and designed. And then we see there among the heavenly host, there are those who come to make supplication. There are those who come to make petition. There are those who are the ones who come to make what in Hebrew is called tefillah. Tefillah. And boy, we'll hopefully get a chance to talk about doing tefillah and doing tzedakah and doing teshuvah. And these three different verb forms of what happens in that realm as human beings encounter that realm of divine infrastructure, holy infrastructure. I hope I've maybe blown your mind a little bit, maybe awakened you to, maybe there's more going on than what you've been looking about in the news or on the social media feeds or even in your own mind as you've been thinking. We're on Shabbat, and on Shabbat we should be able to go to this place and see the majesty and the beauty. Well, we're about to get the blueprint for heaven's court-patterned infrastructure on earth. Mashiach taught us to pray, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth, even as like unto the way it is done in heaven. So if we are hitting this vein, if we are getting in this right revelation, what we're understanding is that our job, our assignment in this season of the year is to reconnect with the vision and then bring it to earth. And so everything we see patterned in heaven, the 24 elders, the 4 living creatures, the heavenly hosts, the supplicants who do teshuvah, tefillah, and zakah in the presence of the great host, in this great ecosystem, the one who sits on the throne, the 4 living creatures, the seraphim and the cherubim, we're supposed to reproduce something that looks like that upon the earth. We're supposed to bring into our lives, into our constant awareness and consciousness, something tangible and visible that the world can see that reflects the beauty of all those different factors of the heavens. If you can think of this, if those of you who know what's usually is called the New Testament or the Brit Hadashah, you read what Paul talks about in the book of Ephesians. There are these 5 different sources of inspiration and revelation. I know it's been trapped and called by some English words as the fivefold ministry. This is merely the reflection of the fivefold aspects of the inspiration and motivation and wisdom generations of God. And you see words in English like apostle and prophet and teacher and pastor or whatever it is and evangelist. And you see these things. But he's talking about this idea that he reflects his glory through other creations and through different levels and layers in which he can get to the human being, and that's our job. Catch the blueprint for heaven's court-patterned infrastructure. Now, warning, danger. If you try to impose this upon existing political systems, or ethnicities, or cultures, and you try to impose it as if it was some sort of a rule they had to follow. If it was a mandate, they had, the word mandate should really begin to buzz in your mind and your heart right now. Every time you hear the word mandate, understand it means oppression. It means persecution. It means hate. So if they're throwing around the term mandate, so we're not of that nature. We're not of that ilk. We're not here to put a mandate upon America or South Africa or European Union or the Philippine government or any of these other nations. We're not here to impose a heavenly vision upon them. We are here to present it to them. And those who wish to come, those who are stirred in their heart by it, will be drawn, and the Holy One will draw them into that place. And that is all we are here for. We're here to be a model. We're here to be a shining example of the fivefold of the aspects of the divine infrastructure that is in heaven on the earth. We are to be constantly abiding in and serving our King in the courts of heaven. Even when we're on earth, we have one foot on the earth doing natural things, dealing with people, and the other in heaven, always focusing upon what his will is, what his plans are, what his decrees have been, what his wisdom would entail. Now, there are layers of thrones in place on earth as they are in heaven. What are the thrones in heaven? The thrones that he has put in place in heaven are layers of worship, pulses of worship. In the book of Revelation, you just keep seeing it over and over again, song after song after song, declaration after declaration after declaration. This is the first thing is to recognize and acknowledge who he is. Know before whom you stand. And this aspect of worship layers, and then wisdom and administration layers, and policy-making layers, and diplomacy conducting, deciding layers, and revelation dispensing layers, and decree publication layers. I want to lay those out for you again in case you're taking notes, in case you want to try to think about this the rest of the day. First layer is layers of worship. Then layers of wisdom administration. Then layers of policy making for the creation, for the world. Then layers of diplomacy conducting, how to engage the world and how to bring the diplomacy of kingdom heaven into the earth and not to create wars and towers of Babel. And then revelation dispensing to those who are hungry, to those who thirst, come to the waters and buy. And this is the revelation dispensing methodologies. This is parts of what the throne's in place and the heavenlies and the patterns that we're following. And then finally, decree publication. And there is a place at which we will speak the decrees, but we'll speak them with a bedside manner, as it may be. We are not to shout the decrees. We are not to arrogantly, condescendingly declare the decrees. We are to speak the decrees with the heart and the passion and the very tone of our Creator. They are all for good. They are all for healing. They are all for redemption. And they will take whatever steps are necessary to bring that to pass. But the ultimate goal of all of them is the redemption of mankind as a species, bloodline by bloodline and household by household, and for the restoration of all of creation, inch by inch, hectare by hectare, over the face of the earth and over the universe, to the original intended Edenic state of beauty and fruitfulness and shalom. So, we have now talked about the mission. Do you know what your mission is? Do you know why you're here on earth? You know what your purpose is? The mission is very simple. It starts by disentangling from and diverging from the ways of the nations and the cultures of this earth. If we don't do this, we won't be able to get to the bigger part of the mission. But the first part of the mission is we must disengage. We must disentangle. We must diverge from the ways, the thoughts, the patterns, the discussions, the conversations, the narratives of the cultures of this world. None of them are superior to any other. They are all poison. They are all cesspools of flesh. I wish I could say nicer. All cultures are cesspools of the flesh, of the raw, uncontrolled emotions, and of the false wisdom of pseudo-intellect, of the mind going crazy thinking about the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, what I like, what I don't like. It's very narcissistic. It is the same thing that led to the fall of Hava and then Adam in the first place. So these issues, we need to know that the cultures around us have nothing good to offer. Their people are capable of great things because they were created by the Holy One, but the cultures were created by man in their fallen state. And so all the cultures, all the ethnicities, all the nations, all the governments, all the political sides, all the political positions are all flawed in a very deep way. And our first calling is to disentangle ourselves from them. Disentangle from their vocabulary. Disentangle from their mindsets and their worldviews. And to disentangle from it and then to diverge in behavior and diverge in speech, diverge in vocabulary, diverge in narrative from them, and keep reflecting and bringing in the culture of the heavens sent and its society. So after we disentangle and diverge from all the nations and cultures of the world, that's not the ultimate goal. That's just the necessary prerequisite. The ultimate goal is to partner and co-labor with the creator of the universe to then bring a kingdom of heaven-centered society model to the earth that will serve as a light to the nations, salt to the earth, wisdom for those who are hurt, healing for those who are broken. So we have the mission. That is your mission. To bring in conjunction with the creator of the universe, to team up with him, to work in side by side, moment by moment with him, to bring this great kingdom of heaven centered society model to the earth. Serve as a light to the nations. Now, we know the mission. All we need now is the strategy briefing. How do we do this? How do we make this happen? What are the components of the plan? What is the strategy? What is the sequence? Well, it starts with the blueprint for the heaven patterned infrastructure. The vision is glorious. The blueprint is going to be shown to be brilliant. The season for kingdom consecration is upon us. Who will accept the invitation to come up here and see what I see, as Moshe would put it? Who will catch the architect's vision for this world, in this day, in this season, on our watch, and for redeeming mankind and restoring creation? Well, last week in Re'eh, in the parsha we called Behold, which was the outlining of the vision in general, Moshe's primary focus was on the vision, and we talked about Proverbs 29, verse 18, without the vision, my people perish. But those who love the Torah, happy are they. The Torah is the vision. The Torah is there is no vision other than the Torah. The Torah is the pattern. The Torah provides all of the framework, the infrastructure patterns that we are to get. The Torah is the vision. So he says, without the vision, my people perish, but happy are those who love my Torah. Well, basically, what last week he began to tell us and teach us, Moshe did, was to see the cultures of fallen mankind as the dark, lethal cesspools of narcissistic flesh and emotion and pseudo-intellect that they really are. I know we need to take a deep breath. I know that's hard to hear because, unfortunately, I think we have become much more attuned to, and our affections are much more fixed upon the cultures of this world than they are the beauty realm of heaven. It is a natural consequence of living day by day on this earth, of being bombarded constantly with the rhetoric and the vocabulary and the anger and the emotion and the pseudo-intellectual nonsense, which they label as wisdom, of this world and its cultures. Last week, we talked about the flashpoints and the places of interaction where this is happening to us regularly. We talked about the forum. We talked about the stadium. We talked about the gymnasium. We talked about the university. We talked about the amphitheater and the entertainment world. We talked about all these realms in which we are being bombarded constantly. Every moment of every day, the forum, the news medias, all the different ways in which we could gather and talk about politics and government and ideology and theory and religion. We are bombarded by this every day, so it is only natural that we would begin to be a storge affectionate. Storge means familiarity. It's a Greek word among the 5 loves that that were mentioned in. The storge is one of those loves, and it's just a love of the familiar. You get familiar with something, so you like it. You get comfortable with it. You indulge it. You begin to think this is the way it should be. Well, that's just storge affection. And most of us have developed a strong storge affection for the things this world is spewing to us, for the viewpoints this world is speaking to us, for the vocabulary it's using, for the terms, the phrases, the catchwords, the buzzwords that they throw at us. And so we just repeat them. We just regurgitate them. We just follow along like mindless, soulless drones regurgitating the things that are being told to us. We fear what they tell us to fear. We get all excited about all the things they tell us to be excited about. We get all nervous about the things that they tell us we should worry about. And we have no connection to our King. And then we come together and we sing a few songs and we teach a few lessons. We have a few Bible verses to memorize. We pray a few prayers. And we walk away and we go right back into the bombardment. And so no wonder we're affectionately tied by storge to this world's affairs. Now, the first thing the Holy One wants us to do is disconnect. Say, enough of that. Many I know are tuning out from things like television, news, and things like that. I hope you are. I hope you're learning that you can't coexist in the kingdom realm and that realm as well. Now, there will be some people who are appointed by the king to monitor, but they are the strongest. And they are the ones who will not be swayed by anything they hear. They will merely report about the trends that are being spoken to the rest of the people. That they are not the ordinary man. Because an ordinary man will get caught up with storge affection for that stuff that's being spewed at you. So to see the cultures of fallen man as they are, for what they are. There is no ethnic pride to be spoken of. There is no cultural superiority, no virtue signaling that should be made by one group to another group. There is none of this division stuff that we throw out there. That is all a cesspool of darkness. That is a cesspool of flesh, narcissistic flesh, narcissistic emotion, and pseudo-intellect. Well, the second thing Moshe talked about last week was to learn how to recognize and avoid the pagan culture flashpoints. The places where they inject you and infect you, shoot you up with the stuff that kills them, that is killing everybody in their community. The injection sites that they give you, the pagan culture flashpoints and seduction traps. And I've talked about those. We talked about somewhat the amphitheater, and we talked about the entertainment world, and the media world, and the political forum, and the university, and the state-ordained agenda of education. These are the things that they try to inject you with the poison that is killing their own world. And then Moshe talked about divergence through dedication in areas that are very visible. The world, you not only need to be diverging, you need to be visibly diverging, where the world knows you are not like them. There needs to be a breaking away that they can see that they know. It will either make them furious or it will make them curious, but it will do one of the two. And so you need to, in certain areas, like the way you adorn yourself, the way you present yourself to the world, how you will or will not wear your hair, how you will or will not adorn your skin, what you will or not allow be punctured into your skin or into your body. These are the things that must be set apart, different than the rest of the world. And they must be visible, and they must know it, and they must either be furious or curious about why you have done or not done what you have done. And then you see how these areas we need to diverge. Also in what we will and will not consider food, and what we will not take into our bodies, let come into our bodies. These are critical factors. The Holy One has protocols. He has ordained instructions as to what those things are and what those things are definitely not. And if we are storge affected to the things of the world, we'll say, we'll just put anything in our bodies. It makes sense. It's pseudo-intellectually appropriate to me. Science, medicine, whatever it is, tells me I should put this in my body or make this on it's okay to do this to my skin or to my facial appearance or my hair. I'll do these things because they say it's okay. But the kingdom of heaven says no. There need to be points of divergence that are very, very visible, because otherwise you cannot reflect the glory of the King. You will merely absorb the toxicity of the culture around you and all it has to offer. So that divergence through dedication in certain areas that are visible to the public. And then we learned last week how to steward, take care of, acknowledge, and care for the poor in our communities. We don't have a government policy to do this. We don't have some philanthropy or some sort of charitable organization or or institution or foundation to do these things for us. This is taking personal responsibility one-on-one with people with faces and names, not ideas, not concepts, not income levels of numbers that we see out there. Not strangers. This is people that are in our and dealing with their particular hands-on need. And that's what he tells us to do in Parsha Re'eh, how we'll encounter the poor. And then we've got introduced to this glorious vision that Abraham had first seen of a city with foundations, a city whose builder and maker is God, a city who's not like any of the cultures and ethnicity cities that they build, a city that we know will be Jerusalem. And to have our hearts begin to hunger and be drawn to and actually hear the pulses of the energy of the heavenly and the earthly Jerusalem, pulsing energy and wisdom and understanding and revelation into our minds and our bodies and our hearts. This call was made last week to have a city where the Holy One will place his name. And this will be the place where he puts his heavenly courts, patterned government infrastructure. And then we will build that out from where it goes. And then he's taught us about getting in rhythm with his pure tone and the rhythms of creation that he has set in motion. And he talked about how we have a true up 3 times a year. We come back to true tone 3 times a year. The true or the Shalosh Regalim, the pilgrimage festivals, at the season of Passover, and then the season of Shavuot or Pentecost, and then the season of Sukkot or Tabernacles. We have this true up. We come back, and everything that we have absorbed in us of the world, of the cultures of this world, of their toxicity, of their cesspools of flesh and emotion and pseudo-intellect, we discard it again. And we come back to true tone every year, we repeat this pattern 3 times a year to get back to true tone so we can begin to build this kingdom of heaven centered society with its heaven's courts patterned infrastructure. All right. Our pivot or hinge point passage this week. I choose Deuteronomy 18, verses 13 through 14. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 13 through 14. I believe this is a hinge point. You know, it's sort of in the middle of this parsha, which started at 16:18 and ends in 21:9. It's sort of in the middle, and it has sort of a focus to get our attention. Everything else we will read should be read in light of this statement. Now, the context of this statement is very interesting. He says that the peoples around you, the cultures, are fascinated, fixated, obsessed with information. They are obsessed with knowledge about things that they don't need to know. And so it comes out in the forms of occult information. They always want to find out what's going to happen in the future. They're fascinated with the future. They obsess about the future. And so they begin to look for soothsayers, and they begin to look for prophets, and they begin to look for all these different sources of information. It said that's not who you are. That's not why you're here. What do you need to know about the future? I'm in it. I'm all over it. I designed it. I created it. Men will not define your future. I will define your future. That's what you need to know about the future. So the Holy One begins in this context. He's saying, now you avoid and consider a total abomination all the things that the nations are doing to try to get information, to try to get knowledge about the future that they can project. To project trends. Oh, I could project you some trends today. You wouldn't like what I told you. But I don't believe the trends govern you. What governs you is the fact that the creator of the universe has a plan and a design, and it is for the good of his creation, and he will bring it to good. And so the context was that we are being instructed to reject, renounce, and abhor alternate or occult sources of wisdom, of knowledge, of information, of inspiration, and of motivation, particularly the occult. But don't think the occult hides in some box somewhere in the back room of a sneaky, smoky building. The occult's all over you, all over this world. Everyone who's talking about the future and everything, and worried about this and saying that and projecting this and predicting that, all that is that. Well, here's the passage, the hinge point passage of 18:13 through 14. In the context that we just mentioned, he's going to spell out what I call the "we are with him" protocol. We are with him. protocol. This is the declaration to the world. You put it on a t-shirt. We're with him. We're with him. He is the one we're with. We're not with you. We're not with your theory. We're not with your worry. We're not with your anxiety. We're not with your sense of flesh desire and urge and appetite. We're with him. And so I call it this the we are with him protocol, and I refer to that as witness part 2. Witness part 1 is what he's told us. I will be with you. I will be with you. He started with the patriarch, but it went to Joseph, and Joseph, I will be with you. And he was with Joseph, but the Holy One was with him. This is the witness part 1. He's with us. But now there needs to be part 2. This is our season to really connect with part 2 when it's not just he's with us. It's we're with him. We're doing what he's doing. We're not doing what you're doing. We're doing what he's doing. We're now with him. This is a marriage. This is ani ledodi vadodi li. This is I am my beloved's and he is mine. This is our season to say whatever you are doing, whatever you're talking about, whatever you're valuing, prioritizing out here in this world in these fallen, broken cultures that you've got, and you think is all wisdom and all knowledge and all information, I'm with him. Now, that's a declaration that most of us are not willing to make yet, but we will be. This is the beginning of the month of Elul, the beginning of the month of our reconnection with our King. And I'm praying that each of you, as you hear these sounds, feel the call and the pull of your spirit to say, no matter what the world says, I'm not with them. I'm not under their spell. I'm not controlled by their thought processes and their vocabulary and their rhetoric. I am with him. Well, that's our pattern. So here's what the hinge point verse is. In chapter 18, verse 13, Tamim tieh, im Adonai Eloheka. You are to be tamim, with the Holy One, your God. You are to be tamim, wholly, completely, exclusively connected with the Holy One, your God. I know some English translations will say perfect. Some English translations will say complete. Or whole, holy, but the W-H-O-L-O-Y, like the whole heart of Joshua. But the word is tamim. And tamim means to be exclusively, completely dedicated. Like a garden enclosed in the Song of Solomon. We are a garden enclosed. We are the sole possession of someone. We don't belong to an ethnicity. We don't belong to a culture. We don't belong to a nation. We live here, we function here, we serve here as best we can to serve our fellow man, but we only belong to one. We have an audience of one. We have a home with one center point, one center around the throne, and his throne. We are with him. Tamim tieh im Adonai Eloheka. You are to be wholly, completely, exclusively with the Holy One, your God. And then it goes on to say, in contrast, ki hagoyim ha'ele asher ata yoresh yotam el me'onanim. Me'onanim. And that means basically in contrast to the nations, in divergence from the nations that you are going in to take possession from, and it calls them me'onanim. And if you wanted to literally translate it, you would call it cloud folk. Folks who walk in a cloud. Folks who are obscured by false visions and false obstacles and things that they can't see. They can't see because they're walking around a cloud. You are to diverge from the people of the nations around you who are walking around in this cloud. We're cloud folk. And they're also ve'et chasmim Yishmael. And you're not to listen to these lot casters, these predictors of the future, these interpreters of trends, these lot casters, these Yasmin, Kosmin. And V'ata lochen natan lecha Adonai Eloheka. And the Holy One has allocated no grace for you regarding such. There are certain things in this world that are outside the realm of grace. And that form of cloud walking, future foretelling, trend setting, worldly approach to life, there is no grace for that for you. If you have grace for it, you will begin to accept it and walk in it and share it. If you think it's okay, if you think, well, it's not as bad as some things. No, he says, this is killing you. This will kill the kingdom of heaven in society on your watch. Don't allow that kind of stuff into your head, into your heart, and don't let it come out of your mouths or out of your behaviors. Separate yourself from these things. Well, this is the hinge point protocols. In the Haftarah for this week, Isaiah 51:12 through 52:12, the Holy One says it this way through his prophet Isaiah. I have put my words in your mouth. This is the witness part 1. I have put my words, he says, to each one of you, to each of us. He has put his words in our mouth. Now, that needs to be exclusive, right? We don't need to be speaking a bunch of other garbage, a bunch of repeating what the world is telling us. I have put my words in your mouth, and I've covered you with the shadow of my hand, not clouds, not cloudy vision. I've covered you with the shadow of my hand, the shade of my hand, in order that I may plant the heavens and lay the foundations of the earth, and say to Zion, you are my people. Awake! Awake! Stand up, Jerusalem! And it goes on, I have taken out of your hand the cup of trembling. The cup of trembling does not belong to you anymore. I've given you the way out of the cup of trembling. I've taken out of your hand the cup of trembling, the dregs of the cup of my fury. You will no longer drink it. And then he calls upon all who belong to the Holy One to depart. Diverge. Separate. This is your time. This is your season before this last of the 3 Shalosh Regalim. The Feast of Tabernacles and the Yom Kippur that leads before that and the Day of Trumpets before that. Before all these take place, in the season of Elul, depart. Diverge. Break loose. That's why I'm being so passionate today. That's why I'm saying things that may seem to you to be unbelievable, that I would say you need to break loose of these things, but he's saying it. Depart from their places and their mindsets into which we've settled, and no longer touch the unclean, tamei things of this world. No longer repeat its unclean language and vocabulary. No longer speak its unclean thoughts and its unclean perspectives and its unclean fantasies of wisdom and understanding and knowledge. No longer do that. No longer take in you the stuff that they're putting in you. Food-wise, entertainment-wise, information-wise, or otherwise. So he says, Anochi. Even I, am he who comforts and consoles you. Who are you that you should be afraid of men who will die? Awake. Stand up, Jerusalem. Awake, and put on your strength, O Zion. Put on your beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, you holy city. For the uncircumcised and the tamei, the unclean, will no longer come into you and pollute you. Shake off the dust. Arise. And then be seated, Jerusalem, and loose yourself from the bonds around your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. And then the last verse of the parsha that I'll talk about. How beautiful on the mountains. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of him who brings a good report, a good news, and proclaims shalom. Well, this is where we're headed. This is the Haftarah. This is the calling of the week. To take this turn away from just we're getting free, we're breaking loose. It hurt so bad when we were oppressed so badly, and how bad they treated us, to the point of, no, we're not running and hiding from them. We're going to turn around, armed and beatified with the beauty of the Holy One, and we're going to turn around and we're going to bring them good news, and we're going to speak shalom to them. That's the message of our Haftarah. I want to go on to a little bit about today. When the Holy One, Messiah, when Mashiach said, and taught us to pray, may your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He was releasing an amazing empowerment to us to have a vision for something more than our earthly systems. That there is a heavenly system, that there is a heavenly vision of administration and wisdom. And so he's going to talk about in this Parsha, Moshe, as he spells this out, there are basically 5 levels of leadership, motivation, and inspiration that he is going to release on the earth that parallel and reflect the images of the 5 things we've talked about in heaven. The seraphim and cherubim, the 4 living creatures, the 24 elders, the heavenly hosts, all those things. So here are the 5. The first one is called Shoftim. He said, I want you to have Shoftim. We'll talk about what Shoftim is. It's usually translated as judges, but I encourage you never to take these English translations and live with them. Do your homework. If you know the Hebrew, you'll know that it means much more than judges, and it means something different than judges. Because if you think about judges, you'll think about some people in black robes making decisions in cases, taking bribes, being appointed by different political parties to fill agendas. That's what you'll think about. And you can never, unfortunately, those are part of the culture that we're diverging from. So that's not what we're looking. We're not looking for a bunch of people in black robes who make decisions in cases based upon their ideology or based upon their position. That is not what we're talking about. Shoftim is the first one. Second one is Shotreem. Similar sounding word, but instead of Shoftim, it's Shotreem. Usually translated as officials or scribes. We'll talk about what Shotreem are. If you think about the Shoftim, I just encourage you to think about the seraph with the coal, the burning coal, that touches our lips and changes our perspective on everything and stirs our heart to want to go out and serve the Holy One. What? Here am I, send me. That's what happened after we got the touch of the coal. So the Shoftim are designed to stir us, to cleanse our lips of all the uncleanness, and then to turn us to the actual service, the purpose for which we were called for. And then the Shotreem, think of the cherub with the flaming sword. They are to guard us and keep us on the way, the pathway that we need to follow, and off of the pathways we don't need to follow. And then the third, after Shoftim and Shotreem, the third model of heavenly inspiration, motivation, wisdom, and administration is Melech Israel. He's in the middle point, the center point. 3 out of 5 is right in the center. The Melech Israel is the center of all things. His throne is the center of the universe. Melech Israel, the King of Israel. We're going to talk about that. Moshe is going to give you the prescription for the King of Israel. And you're going to see he doesn't fit even David at his height, at his best. Even David at his best didn't fit this qualification. So there is another king that will come, another king that is coming to the earth that will reflect the majesty and the glory of the King's throne of heaven. And that is, of course, the one who sits on the throne, beside the one who sits on the throne, the one who is the Lamb that is slain before the foundation of the world, the one who is the Lamb who is worthy to open all the scrolls, the Lamb to whom the rest of the songs of Revelation are sung. Well, there's that one. And then there's fourth of the levels of wisdom and inspiration and motivation that come from heaven that will be on earth are the Leviim and the priests, the Kohanim. They're usually translated as Levites or priests, and I think you'll see where they fit as well. There are 4 courses of the Leviim. There's the Gershonim, there's the Merarim, there are Kohatim, and then there is the Kohanim. There are the 4 courses, the 4 living creatures. These are the 4 elements of men, of the nature of creation as God has made it, that are to reflect His glory in a superb way. So we have that. And then the 5th of the 5 patterns of heavenly courts, wisdom, and administration are, the 5th one is Hanavi, which is usually translated as the prophet. All right. So let's start with our reading. Chapter 16, verse 18. I wish to have you stand with me. Before we read, I will recite our blessing of the house. We'll begin with this reading from Parsha Shoftim. Kingdom of Heaven-centered society with its kingdom of heaven patterned administrations and infrastructure. Chapter 16, verse 18 is where we'll start. Open our eyes, O Holy One, our God, that we may see glorious things, wondrous things from your Torah. For we are but strangers in the earth. Do not hide your commandments from us. Our souls cry out for your judgments at all times. How can a young man keep his way pure? By living according to your Torah. For your Torah is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. Amen. You are to set Shoftim Shotreem, or Shotreem, in all of your gates that the Holy One your God gives you, according to your tribes, and they are to shafat the peoples with mishpat zedek. You are not to pervert mishpat. You are not to show any partiality. You are not to take a bribe, because a bribe will blind the eyes of the wise and will twist the words of the righteous. You are to follow that which is altogether zedek, that you may live and that you may inherit the land that the Holy One your God is giving you as an inheritance. And you are not to plant for yourself any tree or wooden image near the altar that you build for yourself to the Holy One your God. You are not to set up a sacred pillar, which the Holy One your God hates. You are not to sacrifice to the Holy One your God a bull or a sheep which has any blemish or defect, for that would be an abomination to the Holy One your God. And if there is found among you within any of your gates, which the Holy One your God would give you, a man or a woman who has been wicked in the sight of the Holy One your God, because he has transgressed the covenant, gone after and served other gods, and worshipped them, either the sun or the moon or any of the host of heaven, as I have commanded you not to do. And if it is told to you and you hear of it, then you are to inquire diligently into it. And if it is indeed true and certain that such an abomination has indeed happened and been committed in Israel, then you are to bring out to your gates that man or that woman who has committed that wicked thing, and shall stone to death that man or woman with stones. But whoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of 1 witness. And the hands of the witnesses are to be the first against him to put him to death. And afterward, then, the hands of the people. And in this way you will put away the ra, the evil, the selfishness, the narcissism of the world from you, among you. If a matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between degrees of guilt for bloodshed, between one judgment or another, between one punishment or another, between matters of controversy within your gates, then you are to arise and go up to the place where the Holy One your God chooses. And you are to come to the Kohanim, the priests, and the Leviim, the Levites, and to the Shofet there in those days. And you are to inquire of them, and they will pronounce upon you the sentence of Zedek. And you are to Mishpat. And you are to do according to that which they pronounce to you in the place where the Holy One chooses. And you are to be careful to do according to all that they direct you to do. According to the sentence of the Torah that would they instruct you, according to the mishpat which they tell you, you are to do. You are not to turn to the right or to the left from the sentence they pronounce upon you. Now the man who acts presumptuously and will not heed the Kohen, the priest who stands to minister there before the Holy One your God, or the Shofet, that man will die. And so you will put away the ra, the selfishness, the narcissism from Israel. And all the people shall shema and hear and fear, and shall no longer act presumptuously. Amen. You may be seated. Shoftim v'Shotreem titan lecha. You are to establish Shoftim and Shotreem bechol she'arecha, in all your gates, that Adonai Elohecha noten lecha, who has given to you, put in your hands. For your tribes, you are to shafat v'shafetu et ha'am mishpat zedek, and you are to shafat, govern, lead, direct, give wisdom to the people of the nation with just judgment, or mishpat zedek. Well, that's a phrase. That's a Hebrew phrase from a Hebrew-speaking king who declares over us, this is your purpose, and therefore we need to parse some of these words. There are 6 words here that I encourage you to try to parse, and if you let me parse them for you, that's fine, but I pray that the rest of this day, these 6 words will be ringing in your head, and you'll be going back to Blue Letter Bible and the Gesenius Lexicon and the different usages that are found in Strong's Concordance. Not the definitions in Strong's, but the different usages, and compare those usages. And begin to see what these terms really mean, these Hebrew phrases that are usually translated as things like judges and officials and gates and judge and judgment and righteousness. These phrases that you see in English are part of the world cultures. Now, the Hebrew is deeper, and it comes from the heavenly vision. So let's kind of start with that. Shoftim is the first one. You are to set in place. Sum, you are to set in place Shoftim in all your gates, and also Shotreem. What is a Shoftim? Well, Shoftim is plural for Shofet. Okay, that doesn't help you a lot, right? You just defined it with a different term. Shoftim is a plural of Shofet. Masculine, plural. So what's a Shofet? Well, a Shofet is one who shafats. Okay, I'm going to keep defining this down to its core. So a Shoftim are people who are Shofet individuals, and they shafat. Now we need to know what shafat means. And if you want to take the word and use the word judge, you'll fit right in with the world around you. You'll fit in with the culture because they think you're supposed to judge everybody. You're just supposed to come up with opinions on every issue. No matter what you see on what people are talking about on Facebook or the Twitter, you're supposed to have an opinion about it. And it's supposed to be judgmental and critical. And you're supposed to parse between right and wrong and fair and unfair as you see it, as it's presented to you, with not even a real person in front of you, just a bunch of information put out there that is biased, that is coming from an agenda, coming from a different focus. And that's what the world tells you. So understand, this might not be what you think it is. We're not supposed to be judges. And we're not supposed to promote the judging thing that the world does. Yeshua taught us pretty well. You have a different approach, a different calling. You are not to judge. I know that freaks people out, and people want to defend this judging thing so much because they're so attached by this process of storge affection to the ways of the world. But we're supposed to follow the king. We're supposed to listen to the king and do what the king tells us to do. And that does not involve using our mind and our will to look at situations that are hypothetical and that are presented to us by biased people and agendas and try to make decisions based on those things. So what is a shofet? I tried again to keep, every time you see the word shofet or the word judge in your English translations, think about that seraph that came to Isaiah. In each of our gates, we'll talk about gates, we need to be cognizant of the fact that there is a seraph before the altar of the burning coals. And that seraph knows that we are men of unclean lips. And we dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips like Isaiah did. And he knows what we need is to have our lips touched by the burning coal. The thing that comes from the heavens altar. Not the thing that comes from the wisdom of men. Not the thing that comes from the knowledge of the university. Not the thing that comes from Google. This needs to come from the heavens throne. And it needs to touch our lips and burn away all the impurities of what we have been saying and thinking and doing because the world has told us to. So we need to understand the shofet is the one who brings the coal of the altar of heaven down to earth for ours to cleanse us of the way we're thinking and the way we're approaching it, the way we're talking about it, the language we're using, the vocabulary, the narrative we're framing. The Shofet is one who has heavenly vision and wisdom and perspective and motivation, not selfish agenda or even a sense of right and wrong. This is about what's good for the creation and for the kingdom's plan of redemption for the world, long term, generation by generation, across the entire realm and specter of time as humans know it. Shoftim, bloodlines, generations. So a Shofet, to Shaphat, means to take the things of heaven and bring them to earth in order to impact and affect the world and the generations and the people that are there among it. So the next word is Shotreem. Shotreem, and in English you'll read officials or maybe scribes. That'll be the English way of thinking about this process. But in our gates, we're supposed to have these other things. Some people even say police or enforcers, like the Taliban or something. You know, I don't really suggest you have a Taliban to enforce the dress codes or the hair codes or the speech codes of the world. I think the world has plenty of that. We don't need that. Instead, Shotreem are something else. The Shotreem is plural of shoter. Shoter is the noun form of the verb shatar. And what does it mean to shatar? What does it mean to shatar? Now think about the cherub with the flaming sword. What is the flaming sword there to do? What is the cherub there to do? To guard the way. And to keep you from going the wrong way. And to keep you going the right way. To keep you where you, in the realm in which you belong and focus, and away from the things that you don't need to. So now this is what the shoter, its job is to do. We're to have this in our gates. And then the third word is she'arecha, the gates, your gates, second person, plural, possessive, she'arecha, or singular. And so each of us has gates. It's singular, so each of us has a gates. Each of us has gates, plural. Now, in the cities that we dwell in, on the macro level, there will be cities in Israel. Cities that come outward from Jerusalem, take their lead from Jerusalem. Cities of refuge, cities of the Levites, who have normal cities of dwelling. That's on the macro level. But on the micro level, on the individual level of what this goes, the deeper level, the sod level of the Torah interpretation, beyond the Peshat, it means that we also, individually, our lives, which are supposed to reflect the glory of the heavenlies, and the order and the structure of the heavenly courts, we also have gates. What is a gate? A sha'ar in Hebrew. A sha'ar is a portal of ingress and egress. It is an access point. It is a point of access to the world into our souls, and a port of egress from what is in our souls into the world. So what are our gates? The rabbis have been pretty clear on this, but I think it's obvious to see. The gates are our eyes, our ears, what we listen to, what we see, what we let ourselves look upon, gaze upon, and how we let our vision be limited by the lenses we look through. And our ears, what we will listen to, what we don't listen to. Only see what we want to see, only hear what we want to hear. That we have this issue of our eyes and our ears being our gates. And our mouth, what we allow to be ingested into our lives, and what we allow to come out of our mouths. What we let, because out of the heart, the mouth speaks. So now we have these two nostrils, what we allow ourselves to sense and smell and take the fragrance of. And then we have, so these 7 portals, these 7 gates of our life. I could increase it to our heart and our emotions, and where we allow our emotions to be infected by the world, or where we elect our emotions to be governed by the Holy One. And our will. There are ways we could add to this, but these 7 are very clear. These 7. So in addition to the macro level of having wise men who bring heaven's wisdom, eternal wisdom, emet, long-term, cross-generational wisdom for guidance and for redemption into the world, the Shofet and the Shotreem, who keep us going in the right way, in the passage on the right direction. We should have this idea that we should have a seraph and a shoter. We should have a seraph and a cherub over our eyes, with our eyes. And our eyes should be subject to their directions. In other words, we will hear them say, don't look at that. Don't listen to that. Don't believe that. Don't take that into you. Don't ingest that. Don't receive that into yourself. Don't eat that. Don't put that in your mouth. Food, drink, or anything else ingestible. Don't put that in your mouth or in your body. We should have these guides directing us to do these things. Because if we don't, we'll become infected. We'll become poisoned by the stuff the world wants to put in our bodies and our minds and our hearts. And so we're to approach the world and release in the world something that was called mishpat zedek. Now, mishpat is usually translated judgment. Again, we're back to that whole idea of the world thinks judgment is the way to go. Then the cultures of this world, the pseudo-intellectual mindsets of this world, everything's right or wrong. Back to the old fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Everything's good or evil, and we'll tell you, based upon our trajectory, our priority system, our ideas of what self-interest is, what's good and what's evil. That's the way the world treats you. But that's not the way the Holy One calls us to focus. So what is mishpat? Mishpat is the flowing of that coal, keeping a coal coming, where we're continually being cleansed of our uncleanness by the Holy One. So we are to release upon the world a continuous flow of divine downloads of the coals from the altar of heaven that bring us into a state of purity, reconnection with the pure tone of heaven, refocusing upon the will and the priorities of the heavenly realm, and also inspiring us to stand up and say, "Here am I, send me." When we hear that, "Who will go for us?" we say that. So that should be the mishpat. But it's a certain kind of mishpat. Mishpat that's zedek. And again, in English, we read righteous judgment. Righteous. Well, zedek, we have to know what zedek means before we just say, yeah, that's a good interpretation. Because zedek is drawn from the construction trade, and it means that which will work in a building or in a structure. That which will fit spec, that which will carry the weight load, the burden, that which will project the image the architect desires to project. And so it's not just any old thing you throw up there. This has to be according to the divine specification. And so what we are to release is a continuous flow of the heavenly coals from the altar that awaken, cleanse, and inspire, and that fit the pattern for what is being built upon the earth. Fit the plan and the strategies for what he wants to build upon the earth. Not judging a given situation at a given moment based upon what we can see with our limited eyes. Instead, building the kingdom of heaven-centered society and doing what is necessary to see that projected into the world. All right. Now, there are certain things about the process of shofting, or being a shofet. We're not to take a bribe. Before he says that, he says you're not to have any bias. In other words, we don't have any agenda. We're not on either side. We have no attachment to or sympathy for any person or any situation out there. We are totally, completely on the side of I'm with him. I'm not with either one of you. I'm not with you because you're rich. I'm not with you because you're poor. I'm not with you because you're hurting. I'm not with you because you seem to be doing well. I'm with him. And I am not judging on the basis of who's right and who's wrong, what's fair or unfair. This is the world's way. I'm making my decisions. I'm releasing my coal from heaven based on only one thing. What he tells me to do that will build his kingdom upon the earth in bloodlines, generation after generation after generation. That affect way more than the things you're looking at, which is just two people or there's a group of people doing certain things and ideas. I'm looking way beyond that to the whole purpose of creation and where these people and these situations fit into all creation. So no prejudice, no bias. I'm not going to rule for him because he's my ethnicity or color versus somebody else's. I'm blind. This is the whole picture of blind justice as the statue with a blindfold. We're not supposed to see any of that stuff. We're not supposed to see if they're rich or poor. We're not supposed to see if they're Republican or Democrat. We're not supposed to see if they're ideologically this side or that side. We're not supposed to see that. The only issue is, what does God want to do? How does God want to heal this world? How does he want to heal the bloodlines that are involved in this controversy? That's the only thing that matters. Nothing about where you came from. Well, no bias, no prejudice, no interest. And then we won't take any bribe. We are not to decide this will make my side more powerful. This will advance the cause of my ideology or my political persuasion or my religious theological position. We are not to get any benefit from this at all. We are to be totally disinterested in the result, and now we see why this is heavenly and not earthly. Because you're never going to get over this if you try to do it from an earthly standpoint. You know, there is no judge, as good as he may be, who cannot completely put away bias. There is no judge who can say, I'm not doing this for the getting reelected part or getting reappointed part. How will this advance my... They may not do it consciously, but indirectly, in the human form, in human culture, everybody who's in that position, everybody who's in any leadership position has to worry about, will I be able to retain my position? Will I be able to advance to the next position? And that means you're not disinterested anymore. So now this kingdom of heaven process is we have to disengage. We have to separate, to diverge, and we have to connect ourselves to the Holy One. I'm with him no matter what happens. It's like Joshua trying to convince the angel of the Holy One, overlooking Jericho. Are you with them? Are you for us or are you against us? And the angel of the Holy One says, neither. I'm not for you. Even though you're Israel, I'm not for you. I'm with him. I'm with him. That's all this is. Whatever he says, I'll do. And therefore, I'm not on your side or not. And that's this kind of process. The other thing is that these Shoftim and these Shotreem have limited jurisdiction. What does that mean? That means that if something happens in your specific sphere of influence, you have been assigned authority over. And they come to you and you are to render some sort of wisdom from heaven, then that do. But if they are not within your sphere of jurisdiction, they're not within your sphere of influence, if you don't even know their names, if you don't know these people, if you don't have no influence upon their lives whatsoever, they come from some other place, or they're being talked about on the news, and you don't even know who they are, keep out of it. Keep your mouth shut. Keep off of the keyboard. Don't make your opinion known. This is not your business. We have jurisdictional limitations. And we only affect that which we can directly impact for the kingdom of heaven's sake. Disengage, diverge, depart, come out of her, my people. There's such a strong temptation to just want to have your opinion about everything and to state what you think ought to happen in every situation you have known nothing about. We had riots last year because of this. We're having debates on the internet now about who should and shouldn't have a jab over this. If it's not directly in your sphere of influence and you have been assigned to give a direction from the heavenly throne in it, keep it out of your mouth. Keep it out of your ideas. This is the way to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. The third thing is that we are never to corrupt or pervert or twist or adjust or turn to the right or turn to the left of what the Holy One says. We're not to dilute it. We're not to water it down and say, well, it doesn't really matter. I had and for a lull this week, I've tried to put out a little warning to everybody, a caution about how to know if you're estranged from the Creator of the universe. Because this is the season when we break free of our estrangement and we come home. We need to before Feast of Tabernacles. We need to before Yom Kippur. We need to come to a place where all our estrangement, all of our coldness, all of our lukewarmness, all of our disconnection needs to be healed, and we need to come back. And so I left out 7 or 8 things, 9 things I think it was. That is a sure sign that you are estranged from the Holy One. I didn't say you're going to hell. I didn't say you're doomed for destruction. I just said these are signs that you are signs that you might want to consider, that you might find a level of estrangement, some layer, some degree of estrangement from the Holy One if you're seeing these things happen in your life. And one of those was that you are perpetually anxious or worried. Because the word of the Holy One is abundantly clear. There is no compromise. Worry and anxiety are not from Him. Never. Not in a given situation, not a little bit watered down occasionally. Never are they from Him. To the contrary, you see passage after passage after passage in all levels, from the Torah all the way through the prophets, through the Psalms, all the way through the New Testament. This anxiety and worry are from the adversary. Fear-mongering. All these things are from the adversary. That means that if you're indulging them, you are estranged from the voice of the Holy One. There is no question about it. This is not somebody, well, a good friend, a beloved one that I know love, took me to task. Oh, but there are some people who have a chemical in their brain or some kind of a situation going on there that's readable by the MRI that shows that they are susceptible to these things. Of course. Of course. It doesn't change the reality. You're still estranged from the Holy One if you're indulging it. Because you're susceptible to something does not mean you have to go that route. If you have a shoter with a flaming sword, if you have a shofet with a coal from the heavenly altar, you don't have to ever go down that road that you're susceptible to. There are so many ways in which this works its way out, and other things that people may be susceptible to by genetic makeup or background, or by the fact that society has predisposed you to want to be in this scenario or do this or go that route. So many different ways that can happen, but it doesn't change the reality. Doing it is still evidence that you are estranged from the Holy One. Now, that's the key. We can't water down His words to fit with science or medicine as the world tries to define it. His word is His word. And here's the question. Do we believe He is the creator of the universe? And do we trust Him to know what He's doing? And do we trust Him to be the source of everything we need to know in this world? Of guiding us and directing us, of caring about us, being our Father, as we talked about last week, us being His beloved children, and therefore Him being very deeply involved in speaking to us and directing our lives? Do we trust in that? Do we believe in that? Or would we rather get our information from science, people with science degrees and people with medical degrees? I'm not saying those are horrible people. I'm not saying they're always wrong. I'm saying that the source has always got to be the King. His wisdom trumps everything they say. And there is no watering down His word to fit with their theories, to fit with their diagnoses or their prognoses or their suggestions about public policy. That is not what we're here for. If we trust the Holy One, then we listen to what He says and we say we're with Him when the world tries to tell us this, that, and the other thing. And if the world tells us we're susceptible to something, we say, thank you for the word, the information. Now I know what I've really got to work on hard. And how I've really got to connect, where I've really got to connect very strongly with the will and the ways and the tone of my King. And I need that altar to have that coal brought to my lips. I need that cherub with that flaming sword to guard me from going directions that I should not go. Keep me on the correct path. Well, we are therefore not to water down or change or pervert or corrupt the wisdom of the heavens. We are to have the eyes of the wise. The only wise are the heavenly wisdom. There is a wisdom of the earth. James talks about it. It's the wisdom of demons. It's demonic wisdom. And there's a lot of it out there. And it looks like wisdom. It sounds like wisdom. It's got degrees after its name. It's got labels attached to it. But if it is not bringing health and healing to the world, if it is not bringing tikkun to the nations, if it's not bringing wholeness and wellness and shalom into this world, then it is false wisdom, and it is everywhere. And now we need to separate from that. So we are to have eyes of the wise, and we are to purchase and follow and pursue and follow after Zedek, whatever the blueprint calls for. whatever the specs list, whatever needs to happen according to his words, that's what we need to pursue. That's what we need to do. No matter what the world around us is telling us, no matter what science is telling us, or medicine is telling us, or politics are telling us, or ideologies are telling us, or religion as an institution is telling us, we need to follow the way and incorporate the things of the Holy One. You are not to respect persons or show any partiality. You are not to accuse anybody of being privileged or anybody of being anything, basically, that is negative. We are not to buy these theories that divide and separate among us. We are all creations of our King. Now, there are certain aspects of what we do and how we bring these things into our lives individually on a micro level, and then our spheres of influence on a more macro level. And the one of them is that we are not to make any decision, come to any opinion upon the testimony of only one witness. The requirement of 2 or 3 or more witnesses would solve 90% of the world's problems. Your opinions, your ideas, your senses of what you think is fair and unfair, right and wrong, good and evil, all those things that advantageous, disadvantageous, all the things that you would think, they need to be subject to requirement of personal eyewitness testimony in a given situation by more than one person, more than the victim. You never need to just hear the victim's side or what they term themselves or deem themselves the victim, or society or people with interest around them deem them victims. You never need to take one person's side for the story. You need to hear and do a diligent inquiry, the Torah says. Diligent inquiry. You are to inquire diligently. You've got to do your due diligence. And that requires hearing more than one side. You can't just get in an echo chamber and listen to one group telling you what it tells you all the time. If you really are called to make a judgment in a situation, a decision in a situation, bring heaven's wisdom into a situation, then you need to get all sides. And if you don't get all sides, you need to put your fingers and your hands over your mouth. Or keep your hands off your keyboard, because you don't need to be expressing your opinions based upon one half of the story, or one little part of the story, or one agendaized, weaponized side of the story with a bunch of angry, insightful rhetoric in it. And so this idea of 2 or 3 witnesses. And the interesting thing about the witnesses, they have to actually have seen, not just heard. They have to have seen what they're talking about. And they have to have no self-interest. They can't have a position that is biased in this process. They can't be friends of the person who claims to be the victim. They can't be on their side ethnically or religiously or denominationally. They can't be on that side, or else they're not credible witnesses. So all the decisions and opinions and things we're stating, most of them are based upon hearsay, which is not permissible in kingdom administration. Not part of Zedek. What is Zedek and what is called for by the specifications is that we must follow the testimony of 2 or 3 disinterested, credible, unbiased witnesses that actually saw what took place. Now, that means that in criminal cases, for instance, or maybe on social media, situations happen in the world, and we don't say anything bad about it because we don't have all the witnesses in front of us, and it's not within our bailiwick, it's not within our jurisdiction. And so they say, well, you letting them get off scot-free. Then you just don't understand the Holy One. You don't trust the Holy One. The Holy One says, I'm still here. You're with me. You may not hear all the witnesses. You may not hear all the testimony, but I do. I know what really happened. I know what needs to happen, so they will never get off scot-free if they don't need to get off scot-free. Your legal system may let them off scot-free. That's better than the guilty being punished. Your Facebook feed may let them off scot-free. Or your Twitter feed may let them off scot-free. Or your conversation around the water cooler or the kitchen table may let them off scot-free. But they aren't getting away with anything. The Holy One is the one who sits on the throne. The Holy One is the one who holds the right to make the final decision. The Holy One will make sure. Do you trust Him or do you not? Do you believe He really is there, or just a figment of your imagination? Something we talk about to make you feel better. Something that makes you feel like you're a more moral person because you believe in God. Or do you really believe He's there and He's really making the decisions that need to be made? If you do, then you won't be so worried about somebody didn't publicly state that this was wrong or evil when they didn't have the facts before them. Now, if we could all learn in the body, in the kingdom of heaven, if we could all in the community of the redeemed, if we could keep our mouths shut about things that we don't have two witnesses that are credible and disinterested and unbiased in any regard, that is within our spheres of influence, wow, could we change the environment of the world. We could change the whole scent and the whole fragrance of society around us. We would be hated by people who think we ought to be on their side. I'm sure that Joshua was quite taken aback by the angel of the Holy One saying, neither. I'm not with you. I'm not with them. I am with the Holy One. As his captain of his host do I come. Well, that is offensive to people who want you on their side, who want you to feel what they feel, who want you to be in their misery. Misery loves company. So if they're miserable and angry, they want you to be miserable and angry for them, with them. They can pull you down, suck you down in that vortex of negativity. They want you down there, and if you don't go, they may be offended. Much better they offended than the one who sits on the throne. Well, we're at that particular stage where we've been learning this process of kingdom infrastructure and now kingdom due process. We must understand that anyone who comes to us, the next thing is the witnesses who are false, who come to us with an agenda, who pretend that they're just observers, but really have an agenda and a purpose to punish someone else. We must let the things happen to them that need to happen to them. We don't listen to them. And to the extent, whatever it was, here's the way it works. Reaping and sowing. This is one of the ways the kingdom enforces and keeps the process moving. The king keeps things moving. Reaping and sowing. If you reap a false testimony about somebody else, if you reap a biased word against somebody else, guess what you're going to get back? You'll never get away with it. These people that keep doing these things and keep spreading these false lies and rumors and accusations and threatening this mandate and that mandate and this prohibition of travel, and it's going to come right back on their heads because, you see, this is the law of sowing and reaping. Trust the Holy One and trust His processes to make this happen. Well, we are finishing up now our time together. Shoftim, kingdom of heaven, scented society, kingdom courts, patterned administration and infrastructure. Macro level, micro level, what's it all about? It's all about reconnecting to true tone, reconnecting to the Holy One, to realize we don't have this thing all together by virtue of listening to the news and the broadcast and the people arguing and discussing around us. We'll never get it together that way. The only way we can do this is through tefillah, tzedakah, and teshuvah, turning back to the Holy One. And tefillah means to lay aside all the things that we've carried in. People call it prayer, but prayer is not making these requests. Those requests come after you unburden yourself of all the false notions as you picked up thinking about it on the earth. Taking those things off and saying, but what do you think? And then beginning to discuss it with the Holy One. That's tefillah. And then zakah is, okay, whatever you give me, whatever specifications and directions you give me to build the kingdom, that's what I'll build and put into it. So this season of Elul, the season of teshuvah, the season of tefillah, the season of zakah, is on us. It's our time. Awake, awake, O Jerusalem. Shake off the dust, O Zion. Disentangle, diverge, and join hand in hand, heart in heart, word in word, mouth in mouth with the Holy One of Israel to build a kingdom of heaven-centered society. Shabbat Shalom. Leave a message. Let us know you were here. I pray it was a blessing to you. maybe a soul-stirring message to you as well. Amen.